Welcome to Premier Physical Therapy Podcast. This is Chris Kopp. We hope you find these videos informative, accurate, and useful, and hopefully entertaining as well. As with any medical advice, we highly encourage you to seek professional opinions in person for your specific condition before applying anything that you might hear on this video. Now let's get back to the podcast. Hello everyone. Welcome to a Premier Podcast today. We're going to be talking about baseball, youth baseball in particularly, and how we can prevent some injuries that occur with those, or some kids that maybe are going to hurt themselves without some proper technique and just a little education. But I'm fortunate to be here with Dr. Lance Snyder, an orthopedic surgeon here in Jacksonville, and Coach Bob Shepard. And we're here at Jack Russell Park in Atlantic Beach, Florida, where a lot of people have really grown up and played baseball. I think Coach Shep, you probably have coached here many a time. So without further ado, I just want to thank you guys for being here today. And just side note, Coach Shep's son actually got hurt playing baseball this week and broke a leg of all things, and he's here this morning with us after surgery, and Will's doing fine, and he should have a nice recovery from that. So thanks, Shep, for coming out.
Oh, absolutely.
With all that.
Pleasure to be here.
Same thing with you. I know you're busy with families and stuff. Dr. Snyder, tell us a little bit about your background, and I know you have a history of sports medicine, and now you kind of specialize in throwing athletes in your practice. So talk a little bit of how you've kind of gotten to where you are.
Well, sports were so much of a key, and they're probably a key in all of our lives, and they've given me and others so much. So I really love sports and what they can do and what they can teach people, not only physical development, but emotional and so forth. So I grew up playing sports in Oklahoma, played a lot of tennis, football, baseball, played about everything. And just because of my size and my ability to eat, gravitated towards football. Didn't mind getting hit, and ended up playing football in college. And then, always say that, God kind of messed up. So I had the ability to recall things. So I was lucky enough to major in biology and went on to med school. Naturally gravitated towards orthopedics with all the ex-athletes being involved in orthopedics, and then gravitated towards sports medicine, obviously. And I was fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with a lot of great people, and specifically in baseball. I got to work with some professional teams and so forth. So that's been a lot of fun for me. But I like hanging around guys like you and hearing what you guys have to say more than what I have to say. So take it from there.
Yeah, Shep, you and I go way back. We go to church together. We've known each other a long time. You gave my son this baseball glove, which is sitting there when he was a little guy, and he's gravitated to basketball now. So, but I'm not getting rid of that.
Can I get it back? I'll give it to some other kid.
You can get it back. We got our name on there and stuff.
I'll scratch that out and give it to some other little kid.
Pass it on. But Coach Shep, just talk a little bit about your life in baseball. I know you're really passionate about it, and you do a lot of volunteer work, but you've also done a lot of things professionally. So talk a little bit about how you got involved with baseball.
I'm from California and played out there for a couple of years. Played at Pan American down in Texas. And as they say, that those that can't play coach. So I played a little bit in Mexico, and then signed a contract to go and play in Salt Lake City, and really just wasn't good enough as a shortstop. I know I don't look like a shortstop, but I was one back then. And so went to coach in a junior college back in my hometown, and then was at Purdue University for 7 years. Left there, was at Vanderbilt for a minute, and then came to Jacksonville in '98 when I got the hitting job at JU. And then 2.5 years there, our pitching coach left at semester and went to Michigan State, and I went over to the dark side, the pitching side of things. And so throughout my career, I've tried to, in preparation for trying to become a head coach, had spoken with all the best pitching guys that I could find. And so I'm a product of those people. I've had the privilege of working with and for, the best in the business, and as Lance has talked about it, we're a product of our environment and the people who've taught us to be us. It's just our turn. The guys that taught me to be me are either dead or retired. Yep. So, sorry, Dusty, you're not dead yet, but talked to him yesterday.
Did you? Nice.
But the bottom line is, I've been privileged to do what I do, and have spent time here raising my boys here in AB, and spent time from this little league field on up. So trying to help give back a little bit of, my personal opinion is if I before I die, I want to try to give back 10% of what baseball has given me.
Yep.
If I can achieve that, then I've done something pretty special in my life, because I can't hope to repay the rest of what baseball has given me. So that's me in general.
I think I'm the same way. I think I was an engineering student coming out of high school. I was an athlete. I look like a midget next to you two guys, and my son's like the smallest kid. But I was, blessed with good athleticism growing up. Loved to play sports. Soccer was.
You're not
something I was
bragging,
good at.
are you? I haven't evaluated you yet.
Don't look at me on baseball. I am not a good thrower. So let's just.
Got an arm like a leg.
Yeah, I'm fast and quick. We just talked about Lester Hayes and number 37, So unfortunately, as I was migrating through school, I was good in science and math. I had a good memory recall as well, and engineering was what I got kind of pushed towards, and started out in that, and I can't sit still. So I'm sitting here in a computer lab, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I need to be moving around, and then I got wanted to change to pre-med, and then some counselor suggested physical therapy, and went to school, had to volunteer a little bit, and I've actually volunteered to Health South in Orlando, which is a big sports medicine place in Birmingham, and Dr. James Andrews and some things on those lines. And so I started seeing a little bit about sports medicine, PT. I was actually going to be a spinal cord injury rehab PT. I volunteered in that. But as I got into PT school, sports still continued to be a big part of me. I played ultimate frisbee at a high level and was traveling with that.
Is that a sport?
Well, some people would consider it a sport. It's a good sport for me. It's running, and people say, it does involve throwing, unfortunately. And but then I got out of PT school, and I was doing orthopedics. I love the teasing. That's awesome. And but I'll tell you about shoulders. And so I got interested in shoulders because I found, like, in Lance, Dr. Snyder, you may have that same issue. I was trying to apply things that I was taught in school to these people coming in with shoulder complaints. And some were throwers, some weren't throwers. And my tests were like all over the place. We're going to talk about your clinical exam here shortly. And I would do something for one person, it would make them better, and I would do the same thing for somebody else, and it would actually make them worse. And then I was like, this is really confusing to me. And I don't like to lose, and so I had to study. We talked about mentors. I had great mentors that I relied on in my craft. And I had a clinical rotation at UF Health in Gainesville. So I got exposed to some accelerated ACL rehab protocols there. Then I had a mentor up in Indianapolis at Methodist Sports Medicine, Mark DiCarlo, who was president of the sports section. He came down, and then I asked him about some shoulder stuff, and then he recommended, Town Ellenbecker and George Davies and Kevin Wilk particularly. And James Andrews is pretty infamous for his professional athletes and throwers. And then I got better at figuring out shoulder problems and how to rehab it a little bit. But there are some things that, for purpose of today, is really to try to help some parents and some players maybe know a little bit more about how we can manage their throwing arms as they get in baseball. They really love baseball and they want to play baseball, and some things like that. And Dr. Snyder, I know we talked a little bit this morning about your clinical exam. Talk to us about a little bit when someone goes into your office and a parent brings you a youth with having some shoulder pain. Talk us through how you do your exam, because it's a little bit unique, I think.
Well, it's so funny because Bob and I have talked, and I've talked with you, and he intuitively knows what it's taken me years to learn. But so I had a great mentor, and I've talked to Ben Kibler and some other guys, and so I started off with the feet, and all dads are always like, why are you looking at my son's feet? And I said, because I equate the throwing motion to a bullwhip. It starts at the toes and ends at the fingertips. So the first thing I'm going to do is watch an athlete walk. I'm going to look at their thigh foot angle. I'm looking with their feet. I'm looking at their tibial rotation. And then I'm going to have them do a full body squat. I'm going to see what kind of flexibility they have. I've been fortunate enough to work with some great pitchers. Zach Greinke comes to mind. He's an athlete that can take his
had
foot.
a good one last night.
He can put his foot behind his head. So if you're not flexible, you can't pitch.
Right.
So I'm going to have the athlete do a full body squat. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at their core. And a simple test that I do that everybody ought to be able to do. I know Bob feels this way. Listen, if you can throw a ball 90 miles an hour one time, it's not going to work if you can't do it 90 times. So you got to be able to stand on one leg. So I do a full body squat on one leg, both legs. And it's amazing to me. I see these kids and the dad says, it's always the dad, by the way. It's always, my son can really throw. Oh, okay. but he can't do a full body squat. So, you know, your son's going to have elbow, shoulder problems eventually. So I have him do a full body squat and see what kind of core strength they have. And then I go from there. I look at hip rotation. I look at lumbar spine flexibility. I see if they can put their hands flat on the floor. And so I haven't even gotten to the elbow and the shoulder. And the dad's going, "What are you doing, you knucklehead?" So then I look at rotation, and I look at flexibility in the shoulder and the elbow, and then I check stability, and then I check strength. So strength really and these other issues are the last things. Nice. And I know you have a lot to add.
Yeah, so talk about that, Shep. I mean, here's an orthopedic surgeon who's, you know, trained to how to do surgery on a shoulder and an elbow, but yet he's looking at other parts of this guy's body who's there for a shoulder and elbow problem. You have a talk a little bit about your background, and you said you got all the pitching, but
yeah, no, I'm all in on that. I've been coaching pitchers for, my sons are 17 and 18 and only know me as a pitching coach, so that's how long I've been doing this. But I'm a throwing coach. I'm a baseball coach is really what I am. I just coach them all, let God sort them out. I don't really care what they're doing. Right. You're exactly right in your evaluation, especially with an already hurt/injured athlete, and there is a differentiation between hurt and injured. Okay, well, maybe we'll talk about that at some point. So my son is injured right now. He's not hurt. He's hurting, but he's injured. He's broken. There is a difference. So, for instance, with youth players, just from running camps all over the world, from Hong Kong to Jacksonville to California to, you know, Moscow, even with USA Baseball, same thing. We're going to train that core regardless of age, because think of a gentle way to say this, until they get hair down there, you know, puberty is a great equalizer, right? So I really don't give a toot until they get to that point in their lives, because then there's separation moving to the big field. So that group of children, which they are children, I want them blowing dandelion fluff as often as possible, learning how to play a game, which is all it is, like Monopoly or soccer or whatever they want to play, without throwing a baseball to start. Let's work on our feet, okay, how we move our feet. So every single day, we're going to do agility drills, plyometrics, we're going to do hops, we're going to do different things. I prefer to do, with younger groups, do base running, because we're going to warm up the core before we throw, okay? But we're also then training core muscles. So in a weight room in baseball, this is a generalized statement, you're trying to take linear and turn it into rotational strength.
Correct.
So with young children, their flexibility, because there's more interstitial space, which is space between their bones for all you folks, you can manipulate that somewhat with flexibility, okay? So we do a lot of training to stabilize, because our muscles are stabilizing that space.
Right.
Is that getting too deep?
No,
okay.
It's perfect.
So that's what we're going to do on a baseball field.
Yep.
So when there's an injury or a perceived injury and you're evaluating the work that I have done with that player if I'm coaching that player. So probably my guy's not going to be in there, but you're somebody else who doesn't do those kinds of things. Right. They may be in there, a parent or something. So it's a different perspective. I am a parent. I've been in those situations. You know, they're mostly in youth athletics. It's mostly, it's either pay a guy that you think he knows what he's talking about, which he probably doesn't, or he's going to steal your money, or you have a dad or mother that's coaching the team. And there's been some tremendous female baseball coaches at the youth level, by the way, just really good ones. So those folks that need to be trained on how to train their kids. So what I've been able to do is occasionally, when people allow me to, I'll train the trainers, which I do for free, because it's something that's my passion. It's training the trainers on how to train. Right. Does that make sense?
That's excellent. I love to hear that stuff, because I probably wouldn't see your athlete. You know, we did a study when I was with a team that's in the Midwest that, you know, is associated with the Crown. I don't want to do any plugging for what I've done. But anyway, we prevented injuries 80% of the time in our minor league system by working on the things you just talked about. That's not even throwing a baseball. And there's been a lot of stuff on throwing a weighted baseball, and I think we'll get into that. But working on core, baseball player just got hurt. No, I'm kidding.
There's Will's ambulance going by.
There's
again.
Station 55.
Keep that in there. We like that.
It's nice having that real close to my house.
That'll wake you up in the morning.
But talk about your study again.
So we were able to eliminate in our minor league system 80% of injuries by having them focus on not throwing a baseball, but working on the core, working on hip flexibility, working on ankle flexibility, working on rotational strength, as just what you said, and trying to get our core muscles strong before we even picked up a baseball or a bat and did any of that stuff.
Correct.
And we're going to do some follow-up video, I think, with cause we were talking this morning about like where could we go with this topic, and it could go in a lot of places, but I think we need to really get some education out there about what you two guys are talking about, and we'll do some videos about maybe some proper drills and warm-ups involving the core and the lower extremity. You know, the throwing motion, I was on PubMed, which is our research, we talk about research, and there's over 1,000 articles just on the throwing athletes. So it's something that we were trying to research, and I think what you guys are trying to do there.
And that's very confusing to a parent, by the way. Okay,
sure.
So there's no one way, but it's that.
Right.
There's a lot out there.
It's confusing for me as a physical therapist, right? Like I'm trying to figure out.
Extremely confusing.
I was asking you this morning about your clinical exam, and we could talk a little bit about, you know, some specific things that we do see in the shoulder. One of those being an impingement syndrome, and you can have that by a faulty growth of the shoulder blade. I mean, the acromion can come down and just anatomically be down or thin, and the person's going to have impingement. But they also can have impingement probably because of some sort of secondary issue with some laxity in the front of the shoulder and some tightness in the back of the shoulder. Again, that happens, Dr. Snyder, correct me, you know, with probably some excessive throwing mechanics, some excessive stress to the shoulder and not using the trunk and the legs quite so much. So tell us a little bit about GERD and how someone kind of develops posterior shoulder tightness with some anterior laxity and how that can present and then cause some shoulder pain.
Well, that's a great lead-in. Guys a lot smarter than me have looked at this, and there has to be some micro laxity in the throwing shoulder. You know, you can't be a big bench presser, you can't be real tight in the shoulder. So we know the front shoulder has to be a little loose to throw hard. The throwing motion itself is somewhat abnormal, and every time you throw, you can cause some damage to the back of the shoulder. And so what happens basically is there's tearing of the capsule and tearing of the musculature in the back of the shoulder when you throw hard and throw overhand. And so what happens, if you look at the glenoid and you look at the humeral head, the center of rotation changes over time because the back of the capsule gets torn, it gets tight, it tries to heal, and the center of rotation changes. It goes up and back. And when that occurs and you're in the throwing motion, you can get impingement. And what you're talking about, Chris, is internal impingement, not impingement between the rotator cuff and the acromion, but impingement within the ball and the socket and where the labrum is and where the rotator cuff is. And so over time, if you don't do your stretches, and Bob knows way more about this than I do, but if you don't do your stretches and you don't stretch after you throw and you don't stretch a lot, you're going to get internal rotation deficit. Now, we've done studies and we know that if you have greater than 20 degrees of internal rotation deficit from side to side, and I'll have my athlete lay down on a hard surface and I'll check them. If one side doesn't match the other side within 20 degrees, I know that they've got glenointernal rotation deficit. And then I send them to someone like you or Shep and have them stretch it out. And 9 times out of 10, if they'll stop throwing and stretch, they're back out there and they don't need surgery.
I was looking at some articles on GERD in preparation for this, and there's a lot of support for that's treatable. You know, if we don't really feel like it's when I was growing up, but you know, early on we talked about kids throwing and their growth plates would actually, you know, the head of the humeral would we call it retroversion. And we thought that, you know, oh, they had, you know, this much external rotation and only this much internal rotation because the humeral head, you know, rotated and stuff. But we really found actually it's more connective tissue, and it's overstressed over time. And so how we measure that, and we'll do maybe a little video of that. We'll include this in here about how we do that. But it's a total arc of motion, right? So we're going to have, you know, 100 degrees of external rotation here, and then maybe 60 degrees of internal here, and then over here maybe, you know, 90 and 70 or something like that. But in a GERD situation, this may only go down to like 50, right? We would want it to go to 60 because we'd want to have this total arc of motion be relatively the same. So, or 20 degrees deficit, that's pretty significant, right? And I have found, and there's a horizontal adduction test that we can do where we kind of measure medial epicondyle from the table. I usually do that with a ruler, which is another validated study. about how to stretch. So let's talk about warming up and stretching.
So Shep,
I hate stretching. Stretching sucks.
Right.
yeah.
Okay. No, I'm serious. I don't stretch my guy.
No.
No, ever.
Right.
Ever. All right, I'm anti-stretch. But let me explain. I think the word needs to be defined
Yeah.
Right.
for parents,
Yeah.
okay? Because, and I'm thinking out loud, you guys are on the bad end of things,
Right.
okay? I'm on the good end of things, or should be, right? So you're seeing injuries occurring. You're trying to do evaluations on perceived injuries.
Right.
And you're exactly right. We're going to prevent them. How do we prevent them? So, for instance, in 7 years I was at the University of North Florida, had very few muscular injuries because we don't stretch. We work. Okay, so it's the same concept. When kids back in the day, when Nolan Ryan was throwing 200, hey coach, how are you? Good. We're throwing 225 pitches in a game. There was a plan for that. He developed that over time. We have soft people in this country, soft young athletes. Stretch means to them, okay, let's go out cold and stretch.
Right.
That is not stretching.
Correct.
Okay, stretching occurs at a particular point
Yep.
after activity.
Yep.
Okay, so we need to define that.
Totally agree
for
with
folks.
that, Shep. It is really important to understand what stretching means, right? So we call a warm-up is stretching, so dynamic stretching, right?
There we go.
We want to prepare something for an activity. And the research is very strong that static stretching before activity actually could potentially lead to more injury because you just gave somebody range of motion or flexibility that they didn't know they now have. And I think we talked about the importance of maybe some hamstring flexibility, right? But again, we'll do some video on that. Some
different
some
verbiage.
ankle sweeps,
Yep,
some
gotcha.
high leg walks, some high
Yep.
knees, all those things that you were just talking about, all this running around on the field, leg type work before you throw. And you'll see these kids, trying to do this kind of stuff, and you're not. I mean, you're stretching the shoulder blade. Or you're doing. I see them, parents and stuff trying to get them more extra rotation. These kids are going to get extra rotation, right, Dr. Snyder? They're throwing. The extra rotation is going to come. So I agree with you. We need to really educate. So we'll have a little bit of video, you guys, on showing hey, what does
process of
stretching mean, and we'll talk about dynamic stretching and the importance of warm up.
Because you guys are too smart. Okay? All right, I'm just a dumb guy.
Where's my wife?
Okay.
Can we get her out here?
So,
This is
but
on
you understand
video.
my point, though,
Yes.
right?
No,
okay,
yeah,
because
100%.
when I'm trying to teach, we have to go to the shallow end first, then the medium end of the pool, then eventually get to the diving well, and that we all possess a ton of information that if we talk the way we talk when we're together, it's not going to be appropriate for education, and that's just my point.
Right.
So we've got to, I'm not going to say dumb it down because it's not dumb. What I'm thinking is that I would like to see us use your brains to let's come up, and here's the plan for people that are listening or watching or whatever the heck this is. I don't even know what a podcast is, by the way. It's my first one ever.
It's all right. You're doing great.
So I had to ask somebody. So bottom line is, it's just what kids do on their own and have been doing for a long time is play.
All right.
They don't warm up for that.
All right.
Okay, they go to tolerance. So I'm a little tired, I'll slow down. Then I go a little faster, and then they burst.
Right.
Well, that's all their own warm up in their own mind with what their own body can handle. Because the obesity factor in this country, that doesn't happen as often, and with less play and get play dates and all that garbage.
Right.
But if you let kids, you put them in a locked field, they'll have a great time. And they do that on their own.
Yeah.
So how do we keep parents out of their way or help them appropriately supervise, manage that?
Yeah.
I guess is kind of what I'd like to see us do, because
Awesome.
it's a very difficult thing to get across, that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
So.
I think,
Shep, what do you look for when you're seeing a pitcher struggle, and whether it's on the youth level or
Always
high
the
level?
bottom half. I'm not a change arm slots guy, unless you just absolutely suck up here, and I'll drop you down here. Or not lefties, because they can throw from wherever they want, because it's a left-handed game, but that's a whole other thing. Right-handers, unless they're going to injure themselves, which is maybe one or two times in 30 years at any level, they throw the way they throw. So I'll teach them how to move their feet correctly, directionally. It's sequential unlocking from toes to fingernails. It's a different way of saying what you guys said earlier. And we want energy coming out the top. So how are we going to move our feet? So I can get kids lined up, directional, moving their feet in 2 or 3 throws. They're going to have the smile, is what I call it, the smile, right? Oh, wow, I just did that. smile, you know. And the same thing with any athletic movement. If you get them directionally, but you got to challenge them to do that and coach them appropriately. But I work from here down. I don't,
Great.
you know, arm path, all that stuff I don't mess with.
So you got a kid who's pitching well, and they're doing fine, and then they start struggling. What do you see?
Lack of focus, lack of confidence. I'm looking for a bottom half. So I'm not a pitch count guy. I think pitch counts for the birds.
Okay.
I think it's a qualification based on experience.
Right.
But there's been a lot of Little League coaches over the years that have abused that. That's why the rules are what the rules are, because there's a lack of actually hard evidence, honestly. Overuse comes from long periods of overuse, okay? There's not very much, you know, singularity in UCLs and all that stuff. It's a overuse injury. Most of them are. So in the old days when you played football and basketball and baseball and went fishing, you didn't have overuse.
Right.
Okay? Now it's all year round stuff. That's where the overuse occurs with youth baseball. So everybody's right, but I am not a pitch count guy. I'm a tired guy because there's capacities. So you've got a 10-year-old that is a monster. He may be able to throw, you know, 60 pitches, no problem. And you've got a 10-year-old that hasn't played before. He can probably throw 12. Right. At the college level, I had a kid that if he got to 35, I don't care what the count was, we're pulling him because at 36, ball's leaving the yard. Okay, it's just, and he's a wonderful guy. He's a great, but there's capacities for each human being too. So you have all that. My two sons are very different. I have a left-handed son whose capacity and frequency level is very high. I have another son whose capacity level is high, very infrequently.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you manage that as a pitching guy. You have to see that. You got to know your kids. When you've got a whole slew of new kids, you got to figure all that out.
Yeah.
See, and
That's coaching.
I think you've hit on some unbelievable pearls. The studies bear out that in a study of surgically repaired athletes, high school and college, there was a 3,600, let me say that again, 3,600% increase with fatigue, not pitch count.
Correct.
And we had to do something, so we came up with pitch count, and I think pitch counts are fine. But to your point, it's knowing your athlete and communication, and knowing when your guy is fatigued.
And how much training he's had, how much he has been taught, how much he has practiced, how much he can throw. Has he thrown before?
Right.
Hey, do you pitch? Here's the ball. Hasn't thrown before. That makes sense? Same thing. You're right.
Yeah.
So 3,600%.
3,600%. Not
Increase.
360. 3,600.
Right.
Wow.
Right. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
So, you know, we talk about fatigue, and I think, you know, the thing that's important is we just got to let, you know, these athletes and parents of your athletes, you know, they need to tell their coaches, they need to tell them their arm is sore. You know, there's a lot of pride. You know, I've played sports hurt, not injured, and I played with some teammates who wouldn't play hurt, and I used to get frustrated. I'm like, you're just hurt, you're not injured, right? But that's them. So maybe my tolerance is different. I've been very, very fortunate in my career. I've avoided, you know, any really serious, you know, even overuse type injuries. I broke my arm playing basketball for my church. Talked about that this morning, running into a wall. But some athletes have a little higher tolerance levels to stresses. You know, I think some athletes are less prone to injury. Some athletes are able to tolerate a few things, and I think skeletal maturity is really important. I think you talked about puberty. I think that's really important. I think the research is pretty strong maybe on some breaking balls, and we can talk about some of the stuff like that maybe. But I agree with you, pitch counts. If you look at them on a guideline, the age is like 13 plus or minus 2 years. So that means an 11-year-old to a 15-year-old, right? So we want a pitch count for a certain age.
Yeah, but that's
person.
cover your butt stuff.
Right,
Okay,
exactly,
I mean,
right.
but
I think it's important for the athlete to tell their coach their arm is sore.
That's a more appropriate way,
Right.
okay? Because pitch counts are for people that don't know anything.
Right.
Okay, including athletes and parents and coaches.
Right.
All human beings.
Yeah.
I don't care who. And it could include me if you think that about me.
Yeah.
I don't care. But the bottom line is this. If they're trained, if they're allowed to train, okay, so the best Little League coach I ever had was a mailman. Never
mailman.
coached before.
Yeah.
I talked him into coaching the Pony Ball League in Lafayette, Indiana. Hey, you're coaching a team this year. I don't know anything about baseball. Okay, I'll help you. You know what he did well? He managed kids. They loved him because he let them play. He got them all structured, and they did. I just gave them the protocols, and so we call them protocols. Hey, we're going to do this, and this today for this amount of time. If they get tired, let them go get a drink.
Okay.
That's as simple as it is.
All right.
As it is. And the point being, people, because there's so much information, people get overwhelmed. They don't know what to think. They don't keep it simple. Okay. If the kid is tired, shut them down.
Right.
Give them a drink. Okay. And make it push them a little harder next time.
Right.
Then get a drink.
Yeah.
Then get another drink.
Right.
It's fine.
You might lose the game, right? I mean, sometimes.
Oh God.
So I mean, I think
lose a
sometimes,
game in Little League.
So I think
Ah,
sometimes you call it
tough
like
one.
riding your horse, right? So you got the one kid who's just grew bigger, stronger, faster than the rest of the kids, and he can throw. He's the best thrower on the team, and there's a lot of pressure, right, to try to. Man, I just need to get one more inning out of you, right? And then those type of things. And you just gotta have the confidence. And the purpose of today and these subsequent videos that we're gonna do is hopefully allow kids to have fun. The ones that are really good to be able to progress without getting hurt and having to maybe require surgery that may, ultimately, end the potential a baseball career that they could have, or a potential of playing college or playing high school and things on those lines. And the ones that, aren't on that track, still allow them to have fun and participate and throw the ball and have a good time. And
That's
again, not be having a sore arm for 2, 3, 4 days. And it's
Well,
no time to
I'll
play
be
again.
honest with you too. Soreness is okay with me.
Okay.
I'm a sore guy.
Okay.
I want guys sore.
Do you want them throwing again when they're still? You want the soreness to go away
absolutely
before
not.
they throw again,
No,
right?
Correct. But I
So
want them at some point throwing a baseball. You're going to get sore. That's called hurt,
Right.
not injured. They're not
Right.
broken. I want them to be sore. So every time. So for instance, a guy in a bullpen, regardless of age, younger is going to be a shorter bullpen. Okay, so use a high school guy. 60 pitch pen. The next day, I'm always say, "How you feeling today?"
Right.
I always put, "How you feeling today?"
Yeah.
How you feeling today? A little sore right here. Where are you sore? Good.
Right.
Perfect. That's where I want you sore. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to flush. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do the other. It's your heavy lift day. Little guy out here, first time he's been on the mound, 10 years old. He may throw 10 pitches and be sore the next day or 2 days.
Right.
Okay, because lactic acid buildup. If you go to failure, it's going to be 2
Right.
days. It's going to be this. But if you're, so there's all those rules too.
Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing that you have to be really careful of when you're talking about this, because I like sore. Sore means their muscles are building.
Yep.
And I would second that. I totally agree with that. I think you should be sore after you throw. I don't think joint pain's normal, but I think soreness is normal after you throw. And I would totally agree with what you just said.
Yep. As a physical therapist, I part of the skills that we have to develop is knowing where the edge of the envelope is when I'm rehabbing my athletes. Right. I have to take those structures to the edge. If I'm working on tissue remodeling, I got to produce some fatigue, and I got to put some stresses in there. And we know that that's how the body heals and responds, and that's how things get stronger. That's how tissues do get better tensile strength. And the important is we talk about overuse, is when that micro trauma
Correct.
doesn't lead to nice, proper remodeling of tissue, it starts leading to a breakdown of tissue and then eventually failure of a tissue. And
I mean,
then
your
we're
guys
going
are
to-
sore after PT. I
Sure.
know when I'm going through
Sure,
PT,
absolutely.
I'm sore.
Yeah.
Okay,
My hands are
but
tired.
the PT wants me to be. You want me to be sore,
Yep.
correct?
That's right. All right, well, I think we'll wrap this up today. Thanks a lot, guys, for your time. Blessings and prayers for Will.
Thanks.
Man, I was all over my phone, and our kids go to school together, and we know each other, and I love Will. He plays at our church, so all the best recovery for him. Hudson Snyder, thanks a lot
Thanks
for
a
your
lot.
time, man. And hey, we'll be doing some more videos specifically on baseball. We're going to pick these guys' brains a little bit more on giving you guys some proper information on what we talked about today. And thanks a lot for the premiere podcast here at Jack Russell Park in AB, Florida. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it.